recently we both read some pretty long books. They could be considered epics. The book that I read was The Grapes of Wrath. This comes quite a few years after reading East of Eden, which was one of the books that partially got me back into reading. It took me like 3 years to read East of Eden. And I call it one of my favorite books because it was at a period where I never read anything. So the fact that I even got through it should tell you something. But I've kind of for a long time been saying, I need to read the other John Steinbeck books. I saw Grapes of Wrath at a local thrift shop. Mm-hmm. And my first reaction is that I like it less than East of Eden. It's kind of one of those books that feels important and it feels enriching, but at the same time I never was running to read it, and it didn't have like that level of entertainment that I might get from a lot of the mystery books and stuff that I read. My favorite part about it, though, was learning about the real history of the Dust Bowl. I always knew what the Dust Bowl was, but I never actually understood that literally the air was filled with dust and people were suffocating.
I had no idea.
From the air.
It makes me think of that Mumford & Sons song. Dust Bowl Dance?
Not familiar. So just right off the bat, I'm reading it and I'm like, what is the Dust Bowl? And I'm Googling it, and that was pretty mind-blowing. From there, I was kind of learning about this mass exodus of farmers from Oklahoma and that region. And it was this humanitarian crisis that I had never heard of before. So I think that was... What are you thinking of?
I'm wondering when this happened. When does it take place?
During the Great Depression.
Okay.
So this book came out in 1939. It was earlier in John Steinbeck's bibliography. East of Eden, I think, is one of the later books that he read.
He was just getting started?
Yeah, so this, just the historical value, I learned things. It has that classic quality of like teaching you about the human spirit and really resonating on a human level. So all of that, I think it's a great book. It's probably not going to be one of my favorites of the year just because, I like page turners. This book is not a page turner.
It's not a page turner.
It's longer than it looks. It's kind of thin, but like they packed a lot in these pages. So yeah, the plot of the book, it follows the Joad family, which is one family that is traveling by broken down car from Oklahoma to California. That was another thing I had to Google, was the idea of these cars and how this huge family could be loaded with all their earthly belongings into the back.
But how is it a broken down car?
Well, it's just like not a great automobile. There's a whole scene where they go and they're trying to like barter for a car. Or not bartering, they're negotiating car prices. And that was another really unique thing about the book, where most of it is following this Joad family, but then sometimes it would move from the family into kind of the collective for a chapter, where it would be all these different people talking and thinking and moving from the individual to the collective. And it kind of fit the theme of kind of like working class solidarity, and people going through a joint struggle, and if you band together then you're stronger and you can fight for your best interest. So it would go from a very specific family that we were joining and learning about on an individual level, but really it was tying them into a larger movement. And at the end of the day, the book wasn't as much about the Joads and their specific story, but it's about the whole working class people, or specifically the working class of the Dust Bowl. But it's extremely relevant for today and for all times. And there were parts of it where it was talking just about like the historical trend of wealth being concentrated in the hands of the few and powerful, and how they just can't help but hoarding as much as possible until eventually something has to give. And if they maybe gave the working class just a tiny bit more, then they could fend off a revolution. But because they are so inherently greedy, it leads to a revolt. The book is very frustrating at times because, it's hinting at the revolution, but we're not seeing it. And it's showing all of these people fighting for scraps when they should be banding together. There is this one refugee camp that the family goes to where it's showing the benefits of working together. I saw a quote when I was planning for this video by John Steinbeck that said that he did his damnedest to rip a reader's nerves to rags. And I definitely got that sense where it's motivating. It's like, we need a change. I was listening to the audiobook for part of it, walking, and it was a really hot day. And it was putting me right into the struggle. And I was like, I need to go join a union. We need change.
Well, it's crazy that it's like 85 years after it's written, and you can still feel that listening to it.
Well, it kind of, it gives the sense, listening to it and reading it, that like, we are on the precipice of revolution. And it's like, there have been like worker uprisings in various small scales all through the United States, and like after the Great Depression, like concessions were made and all that. But like, other than some general improvements, a lot just because of technology, we're kind of in the same place. And it like, it was at a point where it felt like something was going to give, but it didn't give all the way. And almost 100 years later, it's still like, okay, something has to give. The money keeps getting concentrated in the hands. You know, we're talking really like, Marx Theory 101. Like, this is not like these groundbreaking ideas, but I will say the strength of a book is it gets you really thinking about your time, and it feels like something that will always be relevant. And the content, I'm sure for a lot of people this is not new, and I might sound ignorant for being blown away by the history, but it made me learn something about the world, and it made me not really learn something about myself, because these were already things I'm feeling and ideas I had, but kind of strengthening ideas that I had. And I could see someone reading this book who maybe has never thought about these concepts of working class solidarity kind of getting it. So I think that is the mark of a great book, where loses points from me based on pure entertainment, because I am a child that wants murder and mystery, but I have to give it credit for like really being an amazing emotional story. I don't know if there's much more to say about that, because obviously it follows the lives of this family, and there are all these distinct characters. That it feels more inconsequential, or it feels less relevant than talking about the grand themes of the book. But I will say that I was invested in these different characters and hoping for the best for them, and I don't know, I'm not giving away spoilers, but it's not the most uplifting book. I was thinking about this, it feels optimistic to me, while nothing actually optimistic or positive is happening in the book. But it feels optimistic because it's kind of saying like, something has to give, right? And it has hope in that way, where it's almost like suggesting that these awful things are going to happen enough that workers are going to get sick of it and do something about it. Just going through the Wikipedia page, I saw a whole section on Christian imagery.
Oh.
All of that went right over my head. That's probably a video for someone else to explain, but they're talking about the preacher, the Casey character, and then, big spoiler here, skip 20 seconds if you don't want spoilers, he like joins a union and he gets killed by the cops, and that is what makes Tom then decide that he wants to go fight for the oppressed. And Tom is kind of, according to the Wikipedia page, like the resurrection figure, where they're kind of playing the dual sides of the role. Spoilers over, but yeah, this is kind of one of those books where even when you're not getting it, you just know there's so much under the surface. It's a very rewarding book. It's probably one that would be good to read multiple times. I don't know if I will, but it's going to be sitting on my shelf, and I'm going to recommend it to people with the caveat that it's not the most entertaining thing. It's made me want to read East of Eden. I've started reading The Pearl, so definitely I am a John Steinbeck appreciator. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. It feels like an important book, and I think if you're on the fence about reading it, that you should give it a try.
Well, I think it's disheartening and cool in the same breath that you can read this like 100-year-old book, and it kind of feels like every generation feels like it's on the precipice of something, like getting close to the breaking point. And that makes the book timeless.
Yeah. But it's depressing.
But it's depressing.
Yeah. But then again, what does it even mean to get past the breaking point? Like, unless everything is changing and we have an egalitarian society, then what does it even mean? Yeah. A conversation for more intelligent people. And in terms of it being an epic, what I was going to say, tying it into your book that we'll transition to, is that it is simultaneously a huge sweeping story of like civilization and history as a whole. It's like this movement, this moment in time, but it's also like acknowledged this is something that keeps happening and will keep happening. Every time a society is formed, this is going to keep happening. But it's also a very specific story about this one family, really small scale, getting into their lives. I think probably the story is only like a few months of time. So it is a huge sweeping epic and a pretty intimate family story, and I think that's an interesting duality to have in the book. Why don't you tell us about your book?
Well, I was just thinking that you're much more inclined to read epics than I am.
Kind of, yeah. In a way. So this is your experience doing it.
This is new for me.
Yeah.
My epic novel is The Great Believers by Rebecca Makkai. This is, believe it or not, the second time that I've taken this out of the library. The first time I didn't read it. I didn't feel compelled to. And then I've kind of been seeing it come up more on social media and TikTok recently, and it felt like it was my time. I thought this was going to take me forever to read. It's like 400 pages long, and that just felt daunting because I like reading little 250-page books about weird women. But I kind of felt like I flew through it. I'm like a 10:15, 10:30 p.m. bedtime kind of person, and I was staying up till 11 to read it.
Honestly, I've noticed that you've been staying up later, and I've been wondering why. It makes sense now.
Because I just wanted to stay and sit inside of the book. I was just enjoying it so much. So the main story really follows Yale, who is a gay man in the 1980s in Chicago during the AIDS crisis. And you kind of go through his personal highs and lows, his personal relationships, his career kind of developing as he works in this gallery to try and acquire a really incredible collection of drawings and paintings. And obviously it's a very dark time for him and his community, so you have this clash of like good and bad happening in his life. And that kind of flashes back and forth with 2015, which is present day at the time of the novel being written. And you follow Fiona as she flies to Paris and she tries to get back in contact with her daughter, who is estranged and last she knew had joined a cult, and she's trying to find her family again and reconnect. It is a very sad book. Near the end, and no spoilers, but it's about AIDS, it's sad. Near the end I really thought that I was going to sob. But intertwined with all of the sadness and like the devastation and the tragedy, there is a lot of joy and hope, and that kind of makes it bearable. I think in a lot of ways this book is what people wanted A Little Life to be, and I'm a little afraid to admit it, but I really like A Little Life. This is not trauma porn, it's not devastation after devastation after devastation. The author allows her characters to be human, so you get the grief and the sadness of loss and of going through something so difficult, but you also get their highs, you get the joys, you get them falling in love, reconnecting with people who they've lost, connecting with new people who are like the last people that you'd expect them to form bonds and relationships with. And where are my thoughts? A Little Life, I think, if you've read it, Jude especially is completely defined by his trauma, and I do think that that is inappropriate response to have to such an immense amount of trauma happening in one's life. But this book doesn't box the characters into their trauma. They have like rich, full lives, and I appreciated that. Something I really liked about this book is it's about choosing your family. None of these characters have like close blood relatives who they can rely on when they're going through these difficult times. And you read about these people rallying together who have certain things in common but not really much in common, who are kind of unexpected partners in crime. And it's about how crisis and trauma kind of like binds people together, how it affects your personal history as you grow and change as a human, and then how it affects the generations that come after you, whether it's like a collective tragedy, like tragedy.
It was a collective tragedy.
A collective tragedy, like the AIDS crisis, which obviously has had social and cultural impact for decades, or a personal tragedy like what Fiona's going through, where she's kind of unpacking how her own life has bled into her relationship with her daughter and how it has affected her a generation later. What else have I written? So all of these people really in the book, maybe there are a few characters that are more selfish, but a lot of them put aside their own pride and their selves, their own lives, to care for the people that they love, even people that they used to love who have not been in their lives or who have not been good to them. They kind of push that aside and show up for those people when they need them. And I thought that was a really powerful theme. Made me think about things a lot. I don't know how much more there is to say about the novel without kind of spoiling anything or giving anything away. I do just think that you should read it. I feel like I've kind of been on a streak of 5-star, not a consecutive streak, but recently I've been reading a lot of 5-star books, and this is another one that I gave 5 stars. Going back to like the family-ish saga, epic sweeping tale, I like when books, A, when they have like 2 different narratives because it keeps me engaged, but then B, when is this whole map of characters that kind of branch off of the main people, because it feels like you learn a lot about the individual characters, but also a lot about them as a whole, and the interpersonal relationships help you kind of get inside the story and inside their heads. And I realized also that I'm a nosy person, and I actually, when I'm reading the book, I just want the tea on all of the characters. So when it is an epic tale, there's like more time for all of that detail.
More tea.
More tea. What more could you want? So yeah, this is a recent really great read. This afternoon I was looking into more of Rebecca Makkai's novels, and it seems like she does a lot of the like multi-generational epic kind of things, and I'm looking forward to reading more of her work, but I really would recommend it. And if you have any recommendations for family drama, tell me, because I want more.